Speaking of lucky to have in this community, one of the other things that 55,000 Degrees has brought is an ability to really attract national thought leaders with an eye to broadening all of our understanding of what it works and what is important as we seek a common vision for our community. And that's why we are so lucky in that tradition to bring Dr. Andre Perry, who has completed his PhD, to this group to talk about some of the work that he has done. His scholarship is diverse and really fascinating. Some of it focused on education, some of it focused on wealth and Black wealth in particular. He has become a leading national voice in conversations around equity. And we've been lucky to have him in our community not once, but twice in the last little bit. So if you missed his presentation to LCCI, I think that was recorded and is just powerful. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Andre Perry.
Hello, Louisville. I feel like I'm home. I've been engaged with members of the community for the last few weeks, on and off. So I can't wait until this COVID pandemic calms down a bit and you guys can take me to a proper dinner, have a share a good drink. I know Tate has done a lot of good work. We ran across each other in New Orleans a long time ago. And I'm going to actually speak a lot from my experiences in New Orleans. So I'm actually just going to pull up my PowerPoint right now. And let's see, play from the start. Hopefully you can see me, and I think we're all good. Seeing the forest for the trees. Once I saw and did a little research on 55,000 degrees, it became clear to me that there was a lot of learning that took place that certainly may not have been there in the beginning. And so I'm going to really reflect upon my time as a dean, as someone who managed 4 charter schools in New Orleans. I'm also going to talk about my research around wealth and housing in particular. Because I think, and after hearing so many of the speakers, I am sure that you've learned about many of the things that I'm going to present to you today. Again, I think it was Matt Bergman who pointed to his hair and potential loss in hair. But I used to have these long dreadlocks when I was running schools in New Orleans. I no longer have those locks. I cannot have those locks. And it just goes to show you how difficult it is in this education space. Very difficult. But I think there's an easier way than how we've done things in the past. When I was a school leader and I ran 4 schools out of the Capital One University of New Orleans charter network, is a private public partnership between the 2 entities. And Capital One invested in a charter management organization and I led that effort. But one of the things I heard constantly when I ran schools in 2006, 2007, beyond 2010, is that this notion, if we can only fix the schools, everything will be all right. And so much of our efforts were predicated on this notion of, what is a good school? What are good schools? And there's many opinions of that. Is it to prepare students for the workforce? Is it to raise standardized test scores? Is it to seeking to develop the mind, body, and emotion, human developmental needs? Is it about removing the vestige of discrimination? For me, it involves all of those things. But so much of our efforts have really said it's one of those things. And that's where we go wrong. We need to see this as a cohesive sort of effort. Good schools are tied to strong communities. A community, and I'll just give a basic definition of community. Community is a group of people who acknowledge their interconnectedness, have a sense of their common purpose, respect their differences, share group decision making, and support each other's growth. And this is what there are some important key phrases: differences. You know, cohesive communities are easy when you have people with similar backgrounds, shared history, they all like pepperoni pizza. When everybody's the same, cohesion is great. Schools have an easier time of it. But when there's differences, that's where it becomes hard to tell what a good school should do and what school reform should address. A good keep skipping here. A good education is more likely to occur when our values and political structures manifest the idea that we're all in this together. And based on what I've seen, you're learning that. You know, one of the biggest mistakes I think people make when they set numerical goals are seeing that as the end. You know, one of the questions I received all the time when I was a school leader back then is, what's the fastest way to close the Black-white achievement gap? And it used to drive me nuts. And I used to have this snippy little remark to say, hey, if we stop educating white people, that would close the educational gap. Now, obviously, we don't want to do that. Everyone deserves an education. But in ed reform, we did do a lot of equally nefarious things. We suspended kids at high rates. We fired teachers in New Orleans. We created all kind of rules that sort of hurt the community in our pursuit of higher academic achievement. And so we should never ask, how do we close a gap? Gaps can close. It's how we do it is the question. What's the ethical, moral, organizational factors in how we close gaps? That's what matters. I believe that good communities can engage in a shared educational project. And when I see 55,000 degrees, that's what I think it is. It's a shared educational project. And I'll show you what I mean. I keep skipping here. Hold on. A shared educational project is a vision for education. It's expressed through shared community activities. People participate from all parts of the community. There's a shared language that people understand. So when you say a word that everybody gets it. Now, it's just not the language of the muckety mucks. And I say that I work at a think tank. We love to throw around big language and we like to coin phrases. But if we use that language in the real world, no one gets it. And so you do need a shared language that is truly communal. In addition, shared educational projects, the quality of life growth coincides with educational growth. You don't see educational attainment rise while poverty stays flat. That's a telltale sign that something's missing. And in many communities, you actually see that people making progress on one measure, but in the areas that truly matter, like employment, like degree attainment, and all these other things, you don't see good change. So you want projects that are shared educational projects in nature. It keeps flipping to the next one. So, and I also want to say this, there are things to consider in a shared educational project. Remember this, wealth predicts for education, not the other way around. And so lots of people will say, get a degree and you'll get wealth. Well, remember, with the rising cost of education, that's for many low income or low wealth students, that's piling on debt. And people, and even though in general, a college degree pays out in the long run, people see the big sticker, the price tag, and they're dissuaded by that, and they should be, because being smart shouldn't make you poor. And so we got to figure out ways to make sure we consider wealth that predicts for education, so we shouldn't burden people in the process. And know that the average white family has 10 times the amount of wealth. And this continues after people get a degree. White college graduates have over 7 times more wealth than Black college graduates. So getting a degree just doesn't erase these things. Now, our housing, criminal, and criminal justice policies often counter our efforts in education. So we can do all this stuff in education, and if we're not looking over here in another direction, we might be hurting ourselves. And I'm going to just give you an example how this occurs. This is a chart on housing by zip code. Now, if you, on the x-axis, that's where, that's the percentage of Black people in a zip code. On the y-axis is indicated on the top row. That's where the average listing price is in that neighborhood. So homes where the share of the Black population is less than 1%, those homes on average are priced about $340,000. And it's pretty linear. As the percent of Black people increases in a neighborhood, the home prices goes down. Now, why is that important in education? We know that municipalities use the price of homes to determine how much taxes they assess on those. And so the home price home prices matter in terms of education, how much money a school brings in. Now, this is what's, so we looked at absolute price. Then we looked at structural character. Oh man, my PowerPoint's jumping ahead, I'm sorry. Absolute price, then we control for structural characteristics, meaning we control for the size, the number of rooms, all those different things. But we also control for neighborhood amenities. So we control for education, crime, walkability, all those fancy Zillow metrics. So we could get a sense of an apples to apples comparison between homes in Black neighborhoods and homes in white neighborhoods. And what we found pretty much astounds that homes in Black neighborhoods are underpriced by 23%, about $48,000 per home. Accumulatively, that's about $156 billion in lost equity. Now that is occurring all over the United States. Wherever you see a magenta circle, that's where devaluation is occurring. In Louisville, it's 27%, about $28,000 per home in Black neighborhood in Jefferson County. Now, I just wanted to show how that looks in relative to other places. 81% difference in Lynchburg. Again, these are apples to apples comparison, apples to apples. If you helicoptered a home in a Black neighborhood in Lynchburg and put it in a white neighborhood, it would increase in value by 81%. Rochester, 65, Jacksonville, 47, Louisville, 27. My hometown, Pittsburgh, 11%. There are places where home values are higher in Black neighborhoods, 10% in Nashville, 16% in Wichita, Boston, 23%. But I just want to be clear, Boston is no less racist than Lynchburg or Louisville for that matter. However, home prices are different. So let's proceed. I just want to put this in perspective so that people can understand what I'm talking about. The reason why we need to look comprehensively, that $156 billion would have financed more than 4 million Black-owned businesses, would have paid for more than 8 million four-year degrees, replaced the pipes in Flint, Michigan 3,000 times over, 97% of Hurricane Katrina damage, and it's double the economic burden of the opioid crisis. And this is the reason why I say there's nothing wrong with Black people that ending racism can't solve. that we're constantly blaming Black people and brown people for the conditions that they are faced with instead of looking at the policies that produce them. Now, in the housing example, people are doing everything required of them, and money is being robbed from them every day, not because of their doing, but because of policy. And this is the metaphor that we need to look at moving forward. This, and from what I see and what I'm hearing, this is what you've learned. That it's not enough to just set a numeric goal. That's just a device for us to come together as community so we can see where we need to change structures and where we need to invest. Now I'm going to move on. And I just want to be clear with people. This is a chart by a colleague, Sean Reardon at Stanford. The green, and this shows the learning gaps in race and the learning gaps in income. The orange line is the gap according to race. Achievement gaps are lowering over time. I mean, we're actually getting better and better and better in terms of race, the racial achievement gap. Now, but when you layer in class, you see this, it's going up, it's worsening. And so that's why, so when we look at wealth and education, there's a lot of ties there. I got a piece coming out today that essentially says, when are we going to find an education secretary? It's too long. I want to hear, I want to hear some names. You heard a lot of names thrown out in terms of that ultimately came to be in terms of the Biden administration. We heard my colleague, Janet Yellen. We hear all these names coming about because people are interested in economy. But if there's one thing that I know that is true right now, people are so distressed about schools and when to get back, as well as how we're going to pay for schools to come back safely. This is an economic issue. And we need folks to understand that when we starve schools, when we starve universities, we're starving ourselves. But again, we do that because we're so wedded to this idea, if these kids just work hard, they'll get the degree and they'll get a job. No, there are real structural barriers that fall outside the schoolhouse that prevent advancement. I see Evolve 502 as a great educational project. You're coalescing around equity, but you got to maintain, it's about removing structures and investing in Black and brown communities. Now, what's interesting, I do a lot of work on underappreciated assets, meaning if you just add water, it will grow. Investing in Black and brown children isn't taking away from white kids. But when we invest in Black and brown children, we see an economic and educational growth because of that's where the underinvestment is. Now, one of the phrases I've become, I don't like saying it, I get it, but I don't like saying it. And one of the phrases is data driven. We can lose sight of what we're trying to do. You have to be community driven and use data to improve the community. Too often, we're so focused on a numerical gap that we miss the point. And we focus on the numerical gap. Again, there's too many nefarious ways to close a gap, right? And this is leads to my other point. Kids don't live in school, they live in communities. I love Matt's conversation because let me be clear, we love this romantic notion that education is all about the kids. We love to say that, and we understand why. But education is not all about the kids. They are attached to adults, And we need to worry about the education of adults in the process. One thing that is absolutely clear in my reading of Kentucky, since the Great Recession of 2008, not the current one we're in, you've seen a decrease. We still haven't, I should say, we still not have recovered to 2008 higher ed funding levels. This is alarming. I mean, we should be very worried about that, because a lot of folks are saying, look what's going to have an impact in this current condition by shutting down schools and the kids not returning properly. But let's be clear, we've been denying colleges and universities the resources they need for more than a decade in Kentucky, more than a decade. What kind of impact will that have? So when we're talking about Evolve 502, there are some key policies that and funding measures that you got to point to. Again, I talk a lot about housing because the point there is that if you can't get these wealth things right, these financing structures right, you're going to mitigate all of your efforts. In addition, we need to invest in teachers of color. We know that investing in Black and brown teachers pays dividends not only for Black students, but for all students. And if there's anything that we've learned over the last 4 years, or actually even beyond that, folks don't know history. It's this comical, almost comical critique of the 1619 Project. Points to the need to understand slavery, Jim Crow racism, systemic discrimination, because those things are still with us today. And if education is going to help solve those things, you got to get it at the curricular level. So that's my presentation to you, because after doing just a read of what you've accomplished over the last 10 years or so, it became clear to me that you started off here, but you evolved to, and I like the word Evolve 502 because it truly represents what you're trying to do. It's you've evolved from stating this, no disrespect, simplistic numerical goals, to understanding what a good community is. And so I applaud you. I applaud your good work.